Late September 1944. A dusty country road outside the small town of Hereford, Texas, where the high plains stretch golden under an endless sky. A Greyhound bus, painted olive drab, wheezes to a stop beside a cotton field already shimmering in the heat. The doors open, and under the watchful eyes of two elderly guards with shotguns across their knees, 120 German prisoners of war step down into the red dirt. They are young men of Rommel's Africa Corps and the 352nd Division that bled at Omaha Beach, still wearing faded tropical uniforms dyed gray, the black-yellow-red shield of the Reich sewn on their sleeves. They expect hostility, spit, perhaps stones. Instead, a delegation of local farmers in overalls and Stetsons walks forward, and the first thing offered is not a curse but a cold bottle of Coca-Cola, beaded with condensation, pressed into each prisoner's hand like a handshake. This was the moment when the most feared army in Europe discovered that its war had carried it not into enemy hatred, but into the quiet heart of American abundance. Between 1942 and 1946, nearly 426,000 Axis prisoners, 378,000 of them German, would live in more than 500 camps across the United States, the largest involuntary migration in American history. Most expected barbed wire, starvation, and revenge. What they found instead were towns desperate for hands to bring in harvests that would otherwise rot, and a nation so certain of victory that it could treat its enemies with a generosity many had never known under their own government. German propaganda had painted America as a land of gangsters and Jews, of racial chaos and moral decay. The soldiers who marched off the trains in Alabama, Kansas, Virginia, and Texas carried those images like armor. Yet within days, that armor cracked. Prisoners assigned to the branch camps, simple fenced compounds of 200 to 300 men placed beside farms, were paid the same wage as an American private, 80 cents a day, and scrip redeemable at the camp canteen for beer, cigarettes, and candy. They worked 8-hour days picking cotton, cutting sugar cane, harvesting peanuts, or tea-tasseling corn. And at noon, the farmer's wife brought out platters of fried chicken, cornbread, and iced tea. One prisoner, Unterschritzia Hans Meyer of the 709th Infantry Division, wrote in a letter smuggled past the censors, "We are fed better here as prisoners than we were as soldiers in France. The Americans waste food the way we once wasted ammunition."
War Department records are meticulous. Between 1943 and 1945, prisoner labor saved an estimated 120 million man-hours of agricultural work. In Texas alone, German POWs picked 26 million pounds of cotton in 1944. In California, they harvested the Imperial Valley lettuce crop. In Idaho, they dug the potato harvest that fed half the Pacific Fleet. Contracts were signed in triplicate. The farmer paid the U.S. Army $1 an hour, the Army kept 20 cents for overhead, and the prisoner received the rest. Guards were often old men or wounded veterans who spent more time leaning on fence posts than patrolling. Escapes were rare, fewer than 2,500 in 4 years, and most escapees turned themselves in within days, bewildered by the vastness of the country and the friendliness of its people. The recurring symbol, simple and almost absurd in its power, was the bottle of Coca-Cola. The Army purchased 5.6 billion bottles during the war, 10 for every American in uniform, and prisoners received one free each Sunday, chilled in ice water. To men who had not tasted real sugar since 1940, the fizz and sweetness became a weekly miracle. Camp newspapers printed in German carried advertisements for the drink alongside notices of classical concerts performed by prisoner orchestras. In Camp Hearn, Texas, a mural painted on the mess hall wall showed a smiling GI and a German prisoner clinking Coke bottles beneath the words, "Side by side against hunger." Captured officers, confined to stricter compounds, begged to be downgraded to enlisted status so they could work outside the wire and earn the scrip that bought more of the dark elixir. The transformation crept in slowly, then all at once. Men who had sung Deutschland über alles on the troop trains began humming Don't Fence Me In the cotton rows. Forbidden by the Geneva Convention to be forced into war work, they volunteered by the thousands for extra details, because the farmer's daughter might bring peach cobbler. In letters home, read by censors who rarely bothered to black out the praise, prisoners described movie nights where they watched Hollywood films with Marlene Dietrich speaking perfect German, and baseball games where townspeople cheered louder for the POW team than for the local high school. By 1945, the re-education program showed films of concentration camps. Many wept openly, insisting they had known nothing. Whether true or convenient, the seed of doubt had been planted in soil far richer than any they had left behind.
When repatriation finally came in 1946-47, the departures were strangely somber. Farmers stood at the gates pressing sacks of peanuts and final bottles of Coke into reluctant hands. In Aliceville, Alabama, the town band played Lily Marlene as the train pulled away. A study by the Provost Marshal General found that 68% of returned prisoners expressed positive views of the United States. Thousands applied to emigrate as soon as restrictions were lifted. The first German guest workers in the 1950s often carried in their wallets a faded photograph of themselves in POW denim, smiling beside an American family and a table groaning with food. In the end, the Coca-Cola bottle, cheap glass, cheaper syrup, mass-produced by the billions, outlasted the swastika as the emblem of what had truly defeated them. Not the tanks or the bombers, but the quiet daily proof that a free people could feed their enemies better than a tyrant fed his own. Long after the last camp was dismantled and the barbed wire sold for scrap, the memory lingered in thousands of German households. The taste of cold sweetness on a hot afternoon, the realization that the nation strong enough to conquer them was also generous enough to share its smallest pleasures. And in that sharing lay a victory deeper than any battlefield surrender.